Liz Longley, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You're from Pennsylvania originally, but not the part of Pennsylvania that most people would identify. People would think Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, obviously, which are these like really heavy urban areas. You're from Chester County,
Okay.
Pennsylvania, which, in the words of Democratic strategist James Carville, he once called Pennsylvania Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between. So that is
I
my
never heard that.
impression then of where you're from. You can disabuse me of that notion or not. What was music like in your household growing up there in Chester County, PA?
Well, I actually tell people that I'm from Philly because not many people have heard of the small town of Downingtown that I'm from. But
Yeah.
uh, surprisingly, the music scene that I was exposed to was a great one, and I grew up in a really musical household. My dad was a jazz trumpet player and saxophone player, and
Oh,
my mom always wanted to be a singer. So there was always music on in the household. And when I started playing music myself, I was really lucky to be part of the Philly scene and the Tin Angel and lots of the great little listening rooms around the city. So it was a really rich music life.
oh, right on. So you were bombing into Philadelphia to, maybe play open mics or small gigs up there.
I was not even really legally allowed into these venues, but I was playing them.
So who was playing these venues a rung or two above you at that time? Who was older than you that you were looking up to? Who you saw what they were doing and you thought to yourself, maybe I could get there.
You know, Liz Ann Knott, Bill Deasy, there are a lot of great artists that have stuck to that area. They don't tour as much. Craig Bickhart, he tours a lot around that area still, and a lot of them took me under their wing, and then I moved away, and I still go back all the time. But there were so many amazing artists that helped me figure out what co-writing was, or helped me put together my first tours, or took me into the studio. So there was a great scene.
Wow, so you started co-writing even then. I always associate co-writing completely with Nashville and Los Angeles, but you
Yeah.
started there in Philly, huh?
I did really young. I really struggled to write well when I was young, so it was helpful to me to be exposed to that. I wouldn't say that I was great at it or that I loved it at that time. I still go back. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but it certainly helped me learn. And before I was going to school to learn about songwriting, that was really how I learned.
So what were some of the first lessons that you learned then very early on?
Well, I wasn't I mean, gosh, I was learning song structure. I was like 14 when I started writing.
Oh, wow.
I was learning about production. I was, my dad took me into the studio when I was really young and taught me how to record, and that's where I really learned what it was like to hear your voice back and realize you don't like it. Um, but songwriting wise, I mean, gosh, I was learning the basics really, rhyme schemes and phrasing and but it really kicked into another gear when I went to college and I majored in songwriting. That was a whole new world.
Gotcha. So your dad then, as a jazz horn player, he really kind of took you under his wing musically then to begin. Did he want you to go into the jazz world?
He did and still does.
Okay.
Yes, I got my start in jazz. Like I took a lot of jazz classes and had jazz piano lessons, which you would never know from listening to me. um, and yeah, some of my first gigs were singing with my dad. He had a jazz band, and he would let me sit in, and I would sing all the standards. And it's kind of funny looking back at it. I sounded a lot older than I do now. Even I had a
Really?
whole different vibe.
I guess because you were trying to sing with like a jazz kind of smokier affectation in some way.
Yeah, I'm like 16 years old, and I sound like I just smoked a pack of cigs.
Well, in fairness, when I was 16 years old, I was smoking a pack of cigs. So I
Fair.
kind of understand where you're coming from there. Well, that's rad. So what was speaking to you musically on your own then that was different than what your dad was into, where you decided you had to blaze your own path?
There was a turning point for me as a musician when I fell in love with Joni Mitchell. The record Blue
Oh.
really took me on a whole new adventure. And it wasn't that I wasn't exposed to Joni. My parents are huge Joni fans, but I just sunk my teeth into that record and realized that I wanted to learn how to write songs. And that's when I stopped as much singing jazz and really sat down at the piano and tried to write my own stuff. And yeah, I mean, she still is a constant source of inspiration. I just love what she does, and it made me want to do it. So that's when I decided that
Well,
I was either going to go on the road, because I was playing gigs every weekend when I was a teenager, and I was either going to go on the road or I was going to go to school and learn how to write. And that's what I did. But yeah, Joni Mitchell is the reason. As
she
cliche
was
as
your
that
fork in
is.
the road.
Yeah, she was.
No, I've done a lot of interviews on this podcast, and you're one of the first to say that was their fork in the road. So yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Wow.
That's great. So you, where you would go to pursue this then, my understanding is that you spent a few years at Berklee College of Music applying your trade.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I
So
did.
what
Yeah.
brought you up there, and what was your initial, you land up there on your own for college at a school with a lot of musical heavyweights. That's where people who are excellent at what they do end up for music. What did it feel like to land there at first?
Well, the reason that I pursued Berklee was at the time it was one of the only schools that offered songwriting as a major. And I knew that's what I
Oh, okay.
needed to I really needed to focus on that. And so I took a camp actually the summer before, a songwriting camp there, and fell in love with the campus and just was just soaking up everything. There was so much to learn and geek out on. But when I got to Berklee for real, it was very intimidating. Everything, at least at the time, was you were scored, and everybody had numbers. So there was rankings, and it was just it was intense, but also so incredibly
Well,
inspiring.
hold on. There were rankings as far as like you wrote the 256th best song, you wrote the 19th best song. Like what are the rank? Explain the ranking system to me.
Yeah, there are four numbers. I can't remember exactly what they are, but I think they were. One of them was improvisation. It
Mhm.
was all about what everybody had an instrument that they came in on. Mine was voice. So you were scored by, I think, intonation, reading ability, music reading ability, improv, and something else. I can't remember. So if you ranked like four and up, then you could get into certain ensembles, and you could do the Joni ensemble, and you could do
Oh,
the
okay.
Tower of Power ensemble or whatever it was. So that's how you were ranked. And you could always go back and test for more, but when you got in, it was like, okay, what are your numbers? It's kind of
Oh,
crazy.
see, the old man in me really, I love that. I love that idea that it's all kind of like, they kind of make it objective. And they're either like, you're good enough or you're not. And if you're not good enough, get better, you know?
Yeah, it really made people want to practice. That's for sure. People were chomping at the bit to get another chance to get their numbers up so they could get into the classes they wanted to get into.
Do you feel like that kind of competitive environment pushed you in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise? Or do you feel like it was kind of, kind of, an intimidating bummer that made you close up and go into a shell?
I didn't get super focused on the number thing just because I was a songwriting major. I didn't really care as much where like my voice ranked. So
Right.
the songwriting classes were pretty small, usually like 10 to 12 people, and we'd all share our songs every week. And that was a really that was I wouldn't say it was competitive, but it kept me really writing songs quite at a great pace that I often wish I could tap back into. Um,
Really? Like what kind of pace were you writing them at the time?
oh my God, a couple songs a week that I like still
Oh.
play to this day. You know, that kind of stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just sometimes I'm like, was it Boston? Was it just youth? Was it, you know, lack of responsibilities? Now I have a child and a house and a
Yeah.
marriage and things that matter outside of like how many great songs can I write this week?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep. You can really, 18 to 24, most people can really are responsibility less enough to really just focus on the
yeah,
art at that time.
yeah. I think that's what it comes down to, really. And
It
life
is.
is
Now,
just so, there's so many things you can write about, and your emotions are high, and you just tapped into
yeah.
it.
Yeah. To me, that doesn't, 20 years on, that does not a full life make. I think having the family and and kids. And, that is where I definitely derive most of my meaning from now. So I'm glad that I'm not my age and just sitting in a coffee shop for 16 hours a day trying to write a perfect line anymore. But I can kind of tell that you miss that era a little bit. There's a part of you that misses it. And there is a part of me as well that misses that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think also you can't help but wonder. I mean, even before I was married and had a kid and all those things, I didn't quite have that intensity, and I was starting to wonder, what's wrong with me? What am I not doing? Do I need to get through another breakup? Do I need to mess up my life a
Mhm.
little bit to have those emotions just right there, ready to be carved away at? Um, but it was a time. Yeah, I think I glorify it a little bit for sure.
Sure. Well, that's only human. What were some of the specific skills that you had to improve at once you got there at school that you just looked at yourself in the songs that you were writing and you said, okay, well, this is going to have to go up a level if I want to do this for a living?
So many. So honestly, I don't think I was even aware of the things that I needed to. There were tools that I just didn't have an awareness around songwriting that I have now. The biggest thing for me um, is phrasing. And growing up with my dad as a jazz musician, vocal phrasing was always important, but the emphasis was not on the lyrics and where they fell and um, how songwriting paired with that. And so I took classes with Pat Pattison, who talked um, all about phrasing and where you put things in a measure and how that impacts how they feel and how they come across and how that changes the meaning of your song. And so, what I really needed to learn and what's really important to me now is that my songs feel like uh, like if you were to take all the words out and just hear the melody and the chords together, that you would almost know what the song was about. So it's so that they're paired
Oh,
really well together, if that makes sense. Um,
well, that's interesting to me then because you said two things there, and I'm not sure how they jive together. Which is, in one sense, you want the phrasing, you want specific words to land up in specific places in a song, but
mhm,
then also if
mhm,
you take the words out and you're just listening to like the phrasing and the melodic development, you
mhm.
can tell what the song is about. Let's
Or at
break
least
those two
the
things
heart
in.
of it.
Let's break those things into two parts. So that first part, how do you? I'm very interested in this because I've always kind of gone about songwriting intuitively. So it's kind of neat to hear this explicitly laid out. When you're thinking about phrasing stuff in a way where you want certain words to land in particular parts of the phrase, how do you conceptualize that? And can you kind of give me an example of a time that you've done that before in a song?
Yeah. Okay, here's an example. I have a song called Peace of Mind, and the verses are about an internal dialogue that is nonstop, just relentless and annoying. And so in the rhythm of the verses, I am relentless, and the rhyme scheme is internal and it's fast paced, and it just kind of moves in a way that you're like, ah, this is like chaotic. And
Hmm.
then in the chorus, I open up to ask, where is the silence? And so the notes are much more drawn out, and there's space in a different way. And then when I come back to the verses, it's chaotic again, and I'm showing you what's going on in my mind. And um, another example in a more recent song that I wrote, it's called Long Distance, and super simple idea, but taking the word long and just stretching it out for 2 bars. Sorry, 1 bar, but it's a really slow song.
Fair enough.
um,
Okay, fair enough.
so yeah, that whole idea of like how your musical decisions support what you're saying.
Gotcha. That's really it, that's that's brilliant. I love hearing that explicated, in consciously there. So you finish. How many years did you spend at Berkeley?
For
4 years. Okay. So when you finished up there, I mean, we're from a similar generation, and it's like at that time when we were in our mid-20s, it was like, okay, are you going to New York, Nashville, or Los Angeles? Like those are the three places, and now it's pretty much just Nashville and Los Angeles at this point. Um, how did you land in Nashville? What was that process like? Why did you choose Nashville? Nashville then was different than it is now. It was a much smaller town, 10, 15 years
yeah.
ago. So how did you land there?
Well, I will say that I tried New York City first because it's close to home,
Oh, okay.
and I thought this could work. I had a fear of just moving, you know, as a Northeast girl, I was like, I don't want to move down south and become a country artist. I'm not a country artist, and felt
Yeah.
myself kind of digging in. So I tried New York City. I lasted 3 months. I paid more in parking tickets than I did in rent. I was touring all
Woo!
the time, so I was just, it was not good. Street cleaning was not my friend. Anyway, tried that out, and then I eventually moved down to Nashville. It felt like you said, everybody was moving there. There was just a community of supportive artists and songwriters, and I did struggle with how I was going to not find my voice, but maintain my voice and not be influenced by the country music scene, which, to be fair, I love 90s country music. So,
Same. Same.
yeah, so I was like, how am I going to maintain my authenticity as an artist and not be sucked in to the music row?
How did you?
And it was a struggle.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think musically it seeped in a little bit, which I don't mind. But I think the way that I maintained my authenticity was to keep traveling back to where I'm from and playing my songs for people that know my voice and my music. That kind of kept me in check. And I dabbled in some music rowness. I signed a record deal. I made a record on Music Row, but it all worked out. So yeah, I've been in Nashville since 2011.
There's a lot to dig into there. You said you signed the deal and made a record for Music Row. Is this a record that you ended up having to buy back later on?
Yeah, it's from that label, yes, but I didn't buy
Okay,
the first
so
one back.
okay, explain that process to me. That like the whole signing process, and then going through to make the record, and then what you had to do to eventually get your songs back.
Yeah, so I made 3 records with this label, and the first one I had made, which is why I had made independently, which is they heard it and they signed me, and I was very
Cool.
excited. I had a great team there, and it was a great success. The first record that I did with them, it's
What
called
was the
Liz
label?
Longley. It was Sugar Hill Records.
Hmm.
And so I made my self-titled record with them. I made that on Music Row, but again, I was independent, so it felt like that's how I maintained my authenticity. I made it at Ocean Way Studios and had the best musicians,
Oh
and it was a great
wow!
time. Yeah, it was really
Oh
beautiful.
wow! At Ocean Way, and who played on it?
Oh, Michael Rhodes on bass, Tom Bukovac on guitar,
Vukovac. Nice.
yeah, Near Z on drums. Gus Berry produced it, who I went to college with, and so we were just like 2 young kids, fresh to Nashville, trying to hang with the cool cats.
No, I mean, but really though, I mean, that's like a real.
Yeah.
That's a big girl record there. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that's a big deal thing. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It
Wow.
was. It was. It was wild. I obviously with like a lineup like that and a studio like that, I was independent, and to make that record, I launched a Kickstarter and was like, "Here's my goal. Here's what I would like to do." And
Hmm.
I was very lucky to be funded. So then I got the record
Hmm.
deal, and I was like, "Cool! Now I've got a team." So I did my next record with them. It was called Weightless, and I recorded that with Bill Reynolds, who was in Band of Horses, the bassist at Band of
Hmm.
Horses, and it's a much cooler vibe. I was definitely pushing the limits there, just trying out new sounds. And then I made my 2020 record. It's called Funeral for My Past. I was so proud of it. And I felt like it was some of my best songwriting. I worked with Paul Moak, who's an amazing producer at his studio, Smokestack, and I handed
Hmm.
it into the label that I'd been with for years. And the label had just changed hands. And I
Hmm.
was under the impression that it was going to be really beneficial for me in particular. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And I got dropped like almost immediately
Oh
after
no.
handing that. Yeah, after handing in that record. And I was like, what do I do? Now they have this record in their hands. And they, to their credit, allowed me the option to buy the record back after it had been made. Some record labels would not allow that.
Right.
Um, but it was not at a price I could afford. So again, I was like, I think I have to launch another Kickstarter, which to me was quite embarrassing, humbling, but it ended up being an epic turn of events. 1,302 people supported the Kickstarter and made me the 4th most funded female in Kickstarter history at the time.
Wow. Wow.
So I was able to buy back the record and make an acoustic EP and make a Christmas record. So it ended up being totally amazing.
Ended up being, it sounds like better than if it had come out on the record, but I'm sure it didn't. What did it feel like when you got that call that you'd been dropped from this longtime label that you thought the turn of events was actually going to work out better for you. I mean, that had to be really dispiriting.
I was gutted. It felt personal. I didn't
Yeah.
understand. I was, and the ex-head of the label was gutted for me and apologetic, but he couldn't have done anything about it. It wasn't his fault.
Right.
Um, I felt betrayed, you know, it was really tough. But you know what I can say is it did not change how I felt about the record. It made me
Hmm.
even sure of it. I was like, this is it. This is one that's going to change the game for me. And, I just have the greatest community of listeners that they were willing to be part of it without even hearing it. And,
Yeah.
yeah, now it's another fork in my road.
There's a lot to be said for the modern music business, and people complain about it a lot. But the fact of the matter is that without the tools of communication that we have with the internet and direct to fan communication,
Mhm.
even 15 years ago, this album just never sees the light of day, like
Right.
ever.
Right.
I mean, that's
It's
a
so
fact.
true.
And there are a litany of records that were made this way. I mean, I feel like it's every other month some magazine will come out and they'll be like, here's a record made in 1972 by this obscure artist that's been shelved for 50 years. You know
Wow.
what I mean? I think it's a very common problem from the past that now, if you have followers, has pretty much been solved.
Yes, if they allow you to buy it back, which is not,
True.
I mean, yeah, I got really lucky in that sense. So, silver lining. And I've continued to feel that it's almost like that situation bonded me and my listeners even more than any, like
Hmm.
it was just a come together moment, and now there is a really strong fan community, and it's been a beautiful thing, really.
There's a really funny part. Oh, good. And I can make a Philadelphia reference here. There's a really funny part of the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin where when he first moves to town in Philadelphia, he recommends to the reader, when you go to a town and you're meeting people for the first time, you don't offer to do them a favor to endear yourself. To endear yourself, you ask them for a small favor because people love doing a small favor for somebody else. And it's a
Wow.
small, and it is because the person asking for the favor has shown humility in front of you
Mm,
and humbled themselves in front of you in some way. So that's what that kind of reminds me of. You asking
yeah.
your longtime listeners of, hey, guess what? I need your help right now. Are you here?
Yeah. Right. Wow. I love that. And it's so true. So true. We feel bonded because of it. I did feel so vulnerable, so
Yeah.
just heart wide open to say, here's where I'm at. It's not good, you know?
Yes.
So
Yes.
now I've just, that was in 2020, that album came out, Funeral for My Past. And I had a baby in 2022. Obviously, I didn't do much touring in 2020. And
Yeah.
then I had a baby in 2022, and I've been, you know, what is my next record? And I'm really
Yeah.
excited that I have 2 albums coming out next year, again, released independently. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so it's been a good time. It feels good to be independent.
So how did that whole experience, how has it changed the way that you globally look at the business end of what you're doing? How has it changed you?
Well, to your point, I just feel so much more connected to my listeners, my consumers, and I I share everything behind the scenes with them on Patreon. They have
Hmm.
a passenger seat to my entire career. So now it's like I just have different teammates, and it's really fun to run things by them. From every month, I share an unreleased song, and they helped me pick my songs for my next record.
Ah,
So yeah, it's just a lot more of a collaborative feel. And I feel very safe in that space. It's not wide open on the internet like Instagram. You know, it's a private community of people that I know get my music and support my music. Um, so that's just my new business model is
mhm,
work with the people that want to work with me.
100%. Well, and it sounds like stay master of your own destiny,
Yeah.
in a way, because I don't know. Sometimes I think about, I'm like, all right, well, we could get an offer for a little record deal here and there, but no one is willing to pay me an amount of money that it would make it worth it for me to no longer be the master of my own destiny. There is a
Yeah.
price that I would accept for that. You know what I mean? Like there's a price for everything, but
Let's be
no
clear.
one would even let's be clear. There's a number that I could write on the back of a cocktail napkin that I will, if you Venmo me that, you can have it all. But yeah, no one's coming close to that number.
Right.
In which case, why would I ever relinquish being the master of my own destiny? You know,
Absolutely.
it puts you in a very vulnerable position if you can't release music to people. I mean, you've been completely hamstrung at that point.
Yeah. And if you can't release music the way that you want to, like I knew that with, from my past, I wanted to release a lot of singles and do a slow release and build it up. And I was able to do that. But if I handed it over to somebody else, it would have been a whole different story, a whole different timeline. And yeah, I think there's something to be said for having teammates. But is there a way to have teammates without giving up your vision?
The answer is yes, but the caveat is you have to fund it all yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the caveat.
Yes.
So it's a real bet on yourself type of situation.
Man, it's a weird business. That's why I'm so grateful for podcasts like yours, because you feel less alone in it when you hear other people talk about their journey. I grew up with a lot of people that there's a reason I'm still in Nashville, and it's because I'm surrounded by those people. And it often reminds me that, this is a crazy decision, a life decision, but you're not the only one. And if we stick together and share our insight, it makes the journey a whole lot more palatable.
Yes. Well, it's also a good reminder of like, look, when we all started doing this, we accepted that we wanted a job that was very meaningful to us, and we were willing to likely trade earning power over time. You know what I mean? There's going to be a handful of people who strike it rich, right? But in general, if you want to make money, go work in a bank or go work in real estate. Okay.
Right.
Like that's the sure way there are sure ways to make money. So if you want to do that, go that direction. And it can be a nice reminder here and there. It's like, no, this is the deal that I made. This is the deal with the devil.
Yeah.
That I made.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right. I often have to remind myself, why? What's my why? What's my why? And when I think about my why, it's to feel less alone in my experiences and to make other people feel less alone in whatever they're experiencing through song. And I have that in spades. And so I consider myself really lucky, even if I have a lot of things that need to be done around my house that I can't pay for.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
My literal ceiling is falling in.
Well, there you go. Well, so 2020 and 2021, you were not doing too much touring because of the pandemic, and then you became a mother in 2022, and next year you're looking to head out on the road a little bit. I became a father 8 years ago, and I really had to change up my whole touring model. I used to be gone for 200 days a year, 8 weeks at a time. I haven't done anything longer than a 2-week tour in 8 years. It's a really big difference. How have you had to change up your touring model coming up here now that you have other responsibilities?
Yeah, same thing. I mostly this year just did weekends. I think the longest I was away was 3 days, and next year I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with more than 3 days. The idea of it, at least forcing myself to get comfortable with it. Just for I'm doing a release tour in March. I've got a new EP coming out called "It's Me Again." And those are all songs that have been released before, whether it was with the label or not, songs that have been cornerstone songs for me. I kind of re-envisioned them. That's coming out in March. And so I'm doing a 2-week tour. That'll be my longest stretch.
Yeah.
But same as you. I mean, aside from that, I'm keeping it weekends and it's nice just to have a little bit of a reset, get out there and have some alone time where nobody's needs anything from you.
It's the perfect, my experience has been, if you're gone longer than 5 days, like day 5, you start feeling really weird about being away from your kid. And not that you don't do it here and there, but like you feel weird. But let's not lie. The first 48 hours are fantastic. Like, let's be real here, man. 48 hours with no one asking for a fruit snack to be unwrapped or without stepping on a Lego are pretty decent, I would say.
Amazing. When I was pregnant, I was adamant that I would still be touring when I had a kid, and we'll just bring her along and yada yada. Oh man, she was 2.5 months old, and I was on tour with her, and wow, it was we just brought so much stuff with us. diapers and
Yeah.
burp
Yeah.
cloths and bottles. And so I'm happy not to be doing that anymore. I've just learned, take some weekends away.
Yeah.
It's okay. And if the situation is right, we bring her with us. My husband's in the music industry,
Sure.
and we
Sure.
tour together very well. So we just figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and the simple fact of the matter is, like, even without a kid, I think anyone reaches their mid to late 30s and it's like, I like playing nightclubs, but I don't know that I need to be in a nightclub 200 days a year. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to be sitting next to the space heater in the green room in February in Ottawa to have a fulfilling life. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think
I'm
I've been
fine.
there.
Yes, exactly. You know
Yeah.
the place I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah, I mean, and not for nothing either, but here's the deal. People come to shows on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday. No one really goes to shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean,
No.
so why do you want to go to a quarter sold room, 3 times a week? It's no fun.
Yeah, when you could be home with your family. Yeah. But
Yes.
hey, when you're in your
But I'm saying,
20s, go
well,
for it.
yes. I mean, when you're in your 20s and a borderline alcoholic, I totally get it, because that's where I was. Absolutely.
Oh
But
man.
well, that's right on. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you about your process and these years touring, and yeah, I really
Thank
appreciate it,
you.
Liz.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be part of this. And like I said, I've listened to this podcast and enjoyed so many episodes. And I listen when I'm on the road, when I'm doing my thing. So
There
thank
you
you.
go. Well, when you're on the road in March, you'll pull up your iTunes app and you'll see your own episode in there soon. So thank you,
That's
Liz.
wild. Thank you, Joe.